Hello friends, I welcome you all for a lecture on methodology in operations research or phases of operations research methods. Usually every problem in operations research passes through these phases. As model is a tool to evaluate the alternative solutions. So there are various methods for deriving the solutions from these models such as analytical method, numerical or iterative method, or Monte Carlo simulation. Having the knowledge of these models, if we look at the methodology of operations research, basically it starts from the first phase, that is problem formulation. Here we have to identify the problem, define the problem, we have to collect certain data related to the problem, and then we have to construct the mathematical model for that problem. Once we construct the mathematical model, we have to obtain the solution. We have to derive the solutions, or we have to look for what are the alternative solutions for that model. Once we obtain the optimum solution, then we have to test it for optimality. Testing of the solution, and then we have to establish control over the solution. That means if the solution is optimal, then we have to go for implementation, and if it is not optimal, then we have to improve it. So these are the phases of our problem or methodology. Once the solution is optimal, at last we have to implement that solution. So every problem in operations research passes through these phases, and this is a continuous cycle. As for any problem, there is no specific solution. So again we have to go for improvement over the time. So let us discuss these steps one by one now. Let us discuss first step, that is formulating the problem. As operations research is a research into the operation of a man-machine organization and must consider the economics of the operation in formulating a problem of OR. In this operations research, we have to analyze in depth the problem, keeping in mind what is the working environment, what is the objective, and who is the decision maker, and then the alternative courses of action and constraints out of all the above four components. Then for getting the more data related to the problem, we have to tell the operations researcher to attend the conferences, he may have site visits, he should have certain data about the observations, he should perform some research work, and he should succeed in getting the sufficient data to formulate the problems. So overall, this comes under the identification of problem, definition of the problem, and collecting the data. So this step usually passes through three stages. What are these three stages? Identification of the problem, definition of the problem, and data collection. So this is the first phase in operations research. Now second phase is constructing the model to represent the system under study. Once we collect the data, then we have to construct the mathematical model. That is, once the project is approved by the management, the next step is to construct a model for the system under study. Here, the operation researcher has to construct the model, and he has to show the relationships and interrelations between the cause and effect, or between the action and reaction. Here in-depth study is to be done for the case under study. Now The aim of operation researcher is to develop a model which enables him to forecast the effect of factors crucial to the solution of given problem. Here pros and cons, actions and reactions, cause and effects are to be studied, and then he has to develop a model that should show the relationship between the various factors. Then he can propose a model, he has to test it and modify it if needed, so that the working conditions with constraints are to be included in the model. So many times he has to modify the model to represent the actual system under study. So this is the phase 2 in methodology. In phase 3, the operation researcher has to derive the solution. He has to try the alternative solutions, and once the objective is met, he has to go for the next phase. Here we can say that a optimum solution may be extracted from a model either by conducting experiments on it, that is by simulation, or by mathematical analysis. Here the data should be obtained and it must be appropriate. The information may be available from the results of experiments or from the hunches based on the experience. The experience of operation researcher is important. The data collected or data collection can be clearly effective on the model's outputs, so that the result which we get, that must be having certain accuracy. In operations research, there is a least scope for assumptions. So therefore, operations researcher should not assume that once he has defined his objective and model, he has achieved his aim of solving the problem. The required data collection consumes the time to prepare if data collection errors are to be minimized. Here the data collection should be proper, it should be appropriate. The researcher should have certain experience, and he should try for obtaining the optimum solution by having the best methods of his knowledge. So in step 3, we are inclined or we are interested towards the obtaining the solution for the constructed model. In phase 4, once the solution is derived in the previous step, that solution is to be tested for optimality. Here we know that no solution is perfect and it may not represent the reality to the 100%. That means the model constructed is never a perfect representation of reality. But if the properly formulated and correctly manipulated that model, it may be useful in providing or predicting the effects of changes in control variables on overall system effectiveness. In this stage, we have to look for how correctly the model is formulated and how correctly it is manipulated, because as close as we formulate the model to the reality, it will give us the best solution. Therefore, in this stage, we have to look for the sensitivity analysis, because here we assume that at that instance these readings or observations are getting us, or they are constant. So therefore, for checking the validity of the solution, we have to verify it by comparing the results obtained without applying the solution with the results obtained when it is used. That means when we are really implementing the solution, we have to look for its validity, because these models are sensitive for any change in any of the control variables. Therefore, in testing phase, we have to check for the validity of solutions. Yes, when the solution is tested, then we have to establish the controls over the solution. That means in this phase, operations researcher has to explain his findings to the management before implementation. It may be pointed out that he should specify those conditions under which the solution can be utilized. That means once the validation of solution is done and sensitivity analysis is done, operations researcher must show the findings to the management. If there are certain weaknesses in the solution, he must notify to the management so that the risks, if there are any, are considered while employing the model to generate the results. Then the operation researchers should also specify the limits in which the results obtained from using the model are valid. He should note or show the constraints for the results which are obtained, and at last he should also define those conditions, that is restrictions, under which the model will not work. The restrictions should be proposed by the researchers in the model. And the last phase is the implementation of the solution. So this is one of the important phases of OR or methodology, because here our emphasis is on the implementation of the solution. We are interested here getting the real output after implementing the solution. So this is therefore in this last phase of operations research methodology, the implementation of solutions obtained in the previous steps is to be done for making the expected results. So in operations research, though decision making is scientific, but its implementation involves so many behavioral issues, because human factors affect the implementation of the solution. Therefore, the implementing authority has to resolve the behavioral issues. He has to sell the idea of utility of OR not only to the workers but also to superiors. Therefore, the distance between OR scientists and management may create hurdles. Thus, the gap between the two provides a solution and the other two wants to utilize it must be eliminated. So this is the part of certain conflict now, because as management is interested for making the optimal decisions, but these decisions are to be accepted by all the employees, by the workers and all level of employees. Now to achieve this, both the management and OR scientists should play a positive role. A properly implemented solution obtained through applications of OR techniques results in improved working conditions and gains management support. So therefore, if we consider the behavioral factor in implementation of solution, we guarantee there the success of that organization with the use of OR techniques. So this is related to the phases of OR. In general, we can have these phases or these methodologies or these approaches of OR, that is orientation, identification of problem, problem definition, data collection, model formulation, obtaining the solution, then analysis and information, and implementation and monitoring. And at last we have to collect the feedback from stakeholders. So we can summarize the methodologies in these 7 steps. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you might have got clear understanding of methodologies.